Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you books with found family, and I think like the found family like theme or trope is something that I really enjoy because I think it's like family is more than DNA, and just seeing people make these characters make these such unique bonds that really like stand out. And if you as the reader are able to pick up on that and have such a strong, feeling towards that kind of, friendship that is like a family, I think that's really special. So these are 5 books that have that found family theme to them, and that really stood out to me. And so yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So this is the book slash series that kind of inspired this video, and I'm sure you guys already gonna know what it is, but it is the Inspector Gamache series by Louise Penny. I think this book, like when I think of found family, I think of this series, and because this series has like 16 books already out, you get to see that kind of found family relationship develop and just kind of follow it through like many years of books, which I think is really unique and just it's really fun to see. So this series follows Inspector Gamache, who is head of the homicide detectives in Montreal, and a lot of the murders take place in a small town called Three Pines, which is kind of like Stars Hollow. So if you you have that warm feeling with Stars Hollow where everyone kind of knows each other and like all that stuff, I think you will like that's a good kind of analogy to kind of what goes on in here. Just like that small town like family feel, I just am a sucker for, but I think this author does a really good job at showing those relationships develop and have their ups and downs, and just following these characters over several years of those friendships, I think is something that is really interesting. So like I said, this is like probably the standard when I think of found family. Like I think of this series. So this is another one that really stood out to me, and it's between kind of unlikely, I guess, friends to kind of that found family feeling, and it is Charlie and Eve from the Alice Network by Kate Quinn. And this is just something that I think is just really unique because we follow Charlie, who is very ambitious. So this takes place kind of post World War II. Eve is kind of sent over, or sorry, Charlie is sent over to kind of Europe to get rid of her pregnancy or her problem, and so she ends up running away as soon as she and her mother like basically dock into London in search of what happened to her cousin during the war. She hasn't heard from her since, and so she's trying to find what happened to her cousin, and she ends up crossing paths with Eve, who was a former spy during World War I. And Eve and Charlie just form a unlikely friendship and kind of ultimately kind of a family at the end. And just seeing especially Eve, because she's a very much a cranky old woman, and just seeing that kind of throughout this whole thing, I think was really interesting, and how she's very bitter, she's very angry, but you can see how Charlie kind of softens those edges, and they learn to, respect each other, love each other, and just, it kind of goes off from there. This is probably one of my favorite historical fiction novels. I think the author does a really good job at tying in the World War I kind of spy storyline with the present day one in here. I think it flows really well, and this book, like I said, is near and dear to my heart. I read it right after my grandmother passed away, and it provided me with the distraction that I need. And looking back now, I think it is also kind of the friendship and bond between Charlie, who is a girl in her 20s, and then Eve, who is older, and just kind of that, older maternal bond, I think was just, I enjoyed seeing that. Next up, I have the Gallagher Girls series by Ali Carter. I reread this book back in the summer of 2022 for like the first time since basically I read them when I was like growing up, and that was one thing I noticed during my reread, was just the bond that the characters have in here, whether it is between like the main Gallagher girls and then kind of their significant others. I think that is really well done, and you can kind of see how, they've matured throughout this series, and also kind of how that those bonds that they share with each other kind of grow and just, you know, start out as friends and then kind of have that sense of a family just with everything that they go through. And I think, again, with this reread, it holds up well from me reading this. I think I started reading this when I was in like grade 6 and grade 7, and the last book came out either my last year of high school or I read it in like my first year of university, and I think it holds up now reading it again as adult. The first 2 books are very much kind of more juvenile, but the plot gets more complex, but it follows Cami, who goes to a spy school, and the first 2 books are basically the adventures of Cami at spy school, but eventually the plot and the overarching narrative start to pick up. But yeah, I think just kind of the female bonds in here, especially kind of Cami going to a all-female school, you definitely get to see kind of that, you know, strong female friendships, which is always good to see. So yeah, as I said, this is like, I don't know, like I love this series, and just having like grown up kind of reading this, I think it's really fun. So yeah. So next up, I have the Diviner series by Libba Bray, and I think like when I totally think of kind of misfits forming friendships and ultimately kind of having that family feel, I think of the Diviner series. And so this takes place during the Roaring 20s, and so there are these string of murders taking place that have some sort of paranormal aspect to them, and so we follow a group of diviners, which are people that have some sort of paranormal ability, whether they can walk through dreams, touch an object and know the history of the person who owned it, like those type of things. And so it's just like seeing these people kind of go together, their banter, and just kind of seeing them initially just, you know, start out as friends, not really knowing too much about each other, and then, you know, seeing those bonds strengthen throughout each book, I think is really interesting to see. And so yeah, like I just like seeing also with like their character growths and character arcs, and seeing how that kind of changes the dynamic within that, like the bonds, I think is really interesting. This is a very spooky series as well, so that makes it a lot of fun. I remember reading this at nighttime, and I don't recommend doing that because it really spooked me out, like freaked me out for sure. So just be forewarned. But I think this is like a really good mix of kind of historical fiction with paranormal fantasy aspects in it, and it draws a lot of parallels to, you know, racism, eugenics movement. It doesn't shy away from a lot of the kind of harsher sides of the 20s that you necessarily don't really like, they don't necessarily focus on in like history class. So I liked how she kind of tied in those kind of, you know, movements in here as well. And lastly, this is again one of the ones that I think is like, when I do think of found family, I think of the Inspector Gamache series, and then also the Lunar Chronicles as well by Marissa Meyer. This is like just the, again with like the team of misfits teaming up together and eventually seeing them, you know, just having to be allies to get through the next, you know, the next task, which eventually forms into friendship, and just having that eventually kind of getting that found family kind of feeling, I think is really well done. I think what especially too what helps is that Marissa Meyer is able to craft really distinct characters, and she's able to portray so much of their, you know, personality and just who they are through their dialogue. So you do get a lot of banter, you do get a lot of sarcasm, and just between those conversations she is able to convey so much about those characters and who they are. I think that's what really helps kind of build these characters and develop them. And so this is kind of a fairy tale retelling that takes place in a future kind of world. And so the first book obviously is like Cinderella, then we have Little Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and then Snow White. And so I definitely was like thinking, every time I see this I'm like, I want to reread this series. So who knows, maybe I will reread this sometime this year. But because I do, not only the stories are good, but I do love that found family theme. So yeah, like I said, I'm excited. I think you guys would like kind of like those themes. I feel like this is a very popular series, but I don't hear it talked about a lot kind of now. Like back in the days of BookTube, everyone talked about this series, but yeah, I don't hear a lot of people talk about it now, and I still think it is a series that holds up well, has a lot of, you know, fun adventures, and also the theme of found family. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you think have that found family feel to them and all of that stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.